talking with Graham Jack, who's very kindly agreed to speak to us today about his career journey so far. Graham, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Delighted to be here.
Yeah. So, could you tell us a little bit about your background and your career so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, I'm a senior solution engineer at Salesforce. I'm based in Dublin and I'm covering the Irish market. My career before that, so I've been in Salesforce for 10 years this April. So yeah, I looked very different when I first joined there in 2015. I've had wore many, many different hats. I joined an amazing team called Q Branch in 2015 as a developer. And Q Branch was basically a sales support function. And so I joined as a developer. I then did UX design. My background would traditionally be in design. That was what my degree was in. I did experience design, program management, and operations. And even before Salesforce, I've had a multitude of crazy random jobs from fishmonger to filling vending machines. And I'm very proud of those jobs because they gave me a very good perspective on my life and career
And a
in
good platform
in places like now.
to start off on your professional career,
Y-
right? So from fishmongering
Yeah.
all the way to solution design. So for somebody, I suppose for somebody listening to this and they think of design, typically we might think of very visual things. We might think of graphic design, um, but then there's all types of design nowadays. So when you talk about um, studying design and doing design, what specifically do you mean?
Yeah, that's a great question because you do think of like I've been a designer in a sales environment, and you do get a lot of people that just not that they don't respect you, but they don't understand the power of design. They would traditionally think, as you alluded to, that it's just painting by numbers and making things look nice, but it's a lot deeper than that, making things really good products and designing really good things requires you to really empathize and understand who you're actually designing for. And to do that, you need to research, you need to put yourself in people's shoes, and you need to really listen to them. So that's a big part of design. When we use great apps like OpenTable or Uber or things like this, they didn't just pluck them out of the sky. There was a huge process beforehand of really listening to customers or people or users. So I think there's a huge psychological aspect to design as well. There's feels like human-centered interaction, which involves like studying people's eye movements and things like this. Like there's crazy levels that you can go to within user experience design in particular as well.
So it's really like connecting that the human psychology and the human behavior all the way through to how they actually interact and interface with modern technology. Is that a fair way to describe it, or would you have any tweaks on
Yeah,
that?
yeah, no, that's a fair way to describe it. I think as well, good design is never finished either. That's one big myth or mistake that people think, especially nowadays, we see the pace of technology and the rapidness of how things are changing. Design is an iterative process. The design thinking process, it is linear, but there's circles in this line as well, where you always have to go back and retweak, and there's always some feedback, or you need to listen to someone else, or you run into a problem you didn't think of at the start. So
Okay, that's cool. So before I want to ask you about design thinking, right? Because that's a huge topic these days. But before that, so design is more than understanding colors, palettes. It's more than fonts. It's it's really user experience, user engagement.
yeah, I
What would you
think
say?
the
Yeah.
yeah, the first step in designing a good product is knowing your target audience, knowing who to speak to, and asking them interview style questions, but very open-ended questions, because that's where you get the best information from. You need to really ask people, what does your day in the life look like? Because that's where you get the real understanding of the pain points. If you just ask people yes or no questions, you're not really going to get good information back from them. You need to ask them, tell me about your day. What do you do when you get up in the morning? Oh, I get up in the morning and, I get in my car and I've got a, a 2 hour drive this way and it's really boring. So I have to put on a podcast, and then that's where you start to go, okay, so why are you putting on the podcast? Because you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to cure the boredom or the feeling. So it's a lot about understanding and tapping into people's feelings, where the pains are, and ultimately every product that we use or tool, whether it's like a piece of software, an app, it's solving a problem for us. So to solve the problem, we have to ask the right questions to understand what the problem is.
Wow, so
So
it's
it's a
really a
lot
deep
deeper.
dive.
Yeah.
It's a deep dive, isn't it,
Yeah.
into the customer's behavior and their psychology. Maybe sometimes they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing, or they haven't thought about it or reflected on it.
Yeah, that's a very true point as well. In my current job now, it's more technical than design, but there's still a huge psychological aspect to understanding the day in the life of the customer. And like 9 times out of 10, we when we have a discovery call with a customer, they are saying, "Oh, I didn't think of that," or "Oh, that would be great to have," you know. And it's our job as designers or solution engineers or salespeople to actually, we're not just trying to sell somebody something, we're trying to help them solve a problem. We're trying to help
Mm.
their business grow in a simple, to use a simple phrase, but there's so much more nuance to it, you know? And that's where the human aspect comes in of speaking and talking and empathizing with people.
So you have to really understand the design principles. You have to have the technical skills, but also you have to have the people skills, crucially, to be able to link
Yeah.
those other two together. I'm really interested in understanding how you think about the idea that customers know what they want, and it's your job to then facilitate that. Versus, I think there's people like Steve Jobs or maybe other designers like Johnny Vers who would say, "No, we're actually the professionals. We know what's best, and we're going to tell them what's best because we're the experts." So it's like, is it customer centric or is it designer centric? Like, who knows best? How do you think about that when you're designing?
Mm, I would say it's human centric. So nobody's correct. You mentioned Johnny, who's for people that don't know, he was a very famous designer with Apple. Of course, he's going to know a lot more than some people, but he still has to test those products that he's creating. He still has to get that information from somewhere. Everything that he did learn, I can guarantee it wasn't just from a book. It was from real life experience, from talking to people, to understanding their problems. And even if you look back to use Johnny and Apple as an example, the way they market their products as well, you know, the iPod, I'm paraphrasing here, I can't remember exactly how they marketed it, but they didn't say, you know, this iPod can hold 20,000 songs. It says, you know, 20,000 songs in your pocket or something like that. Just it was the way that they marketed to people as well, is in a similar vein to what I'm explaining. It's phrasing things in a way that, oh, this is actually solving a problem for me. I don't have to carry 50 CDs with me. I now have them all in my pocket. So that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing is very interesting to look at. And Apple are the best at product design and marketing, in my opinion, and they really make great products. So they're a good use case or company to look at as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of like they're telling you the end value that you get compared to the features, because you know we don't necessarily want features. We want the end value that the features give us, right? We want that end result. I
Yeah,
want 20,000 songs in my pocket. I'm not really bothered if it's XYZ length or breadth or
yeah,
there's 5 gigs. I don't know what that means. 20,000 songs. That's what I want.
yeah, and in your pocket as well. So handy, brilliant. That's the way people think. Yeah.
So there's a big part to simplifying the complexity of these things. How do you go about doing that as a designer? And is that one of the most important things?
Yeah, absolutely. You can design the best product in the world or have the best service in the world, but if the customer doesn't understand how it's adding value to them or how it's, solving their problem, they're never going to go and use the product. when you're selling software or whatever it is to a customer, you're always in competition with other people again. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, if you just go in and start rattling off product features and this is what it can do, look at this, isn't it so great? You don't differentiate yourself from the competitors, so you're just all the same. But when you create that story around, the frictionless day in the life of the customer's customer, and then you just weave in how your product solves certain touch points along it, then they start becoming more emotionally invested or attached to the story. And then that's what differentiates you as well.
Wow. Now, is that all part of your role, weaving in the stories?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. More so because of the background I came from as well, but it's very much encouraged, yeah, to do persona-based selling, value-based selling, show something and then tell somebody why are we showing it. There's no point in just, as I said, going through all product features. Wow, that's great. I could have just Googled that or watched a YouTube video, but what does that mean for me? What's the key value drivers, or what does it mean for my company? What I always say to myself when I'm building a demo or I'm showing a demo or showing an app, so what? Every time I build a certain uh a story out and maybe it's like 15 different slides, every slide when I go back, I look at it and I say, so what? Like why, if I'm the customer, why am I looking at this? Why do I want to see this?
Yeah. Yeah. What is the value there? What are you really trying to say with that slide? What am I supposed to take
Yeah,
from it, right?
yeah, exactly.
Well, so it's fascinating, right? Because if somebody talks to you about design, they might associate, like I did at the start, with colors, with fonts, with graphics, with images, not really be able to connect it. But then once we get into it, there's so much strategy, there's so much client relationship management, there's so much understanding of human behavior and psychology. Like, how did you chart that course? Were you interested in art in school? Were you interested in English in school?
I was interested in art and interested in design, but Ronan, I couldn't draw for my life to save my life. I was never a good artist. Often said to people along my career, even when I was in design, like I am not the best designer, but I was always a really good communicator. I was
Hmm.
very easy to work with. I love the human aspect of speaking like we are now. I love talking to customers. I take a genuine, authentic interest in what they're trying to do, and then the colors and the shapes and all that kind of stuff comes afterwards. So I I think it's very important for people to understand what their strengths are and what they're interested in, but importantly as well, what their strengths aren't, because there's no such thing as a self-made person. Everybody has to help you along the way in a team. So I knew what my strengths are, and you can kind of see that in my career progression from being UX designer to moving into kind of design operations and program management. That was more about, I'm going to take a step back, because we would hire new people on our team and I would see the things they were doing and just say, I'm dust here. You guys are unbelievable. They were true artists, true designers. They could draw on their iPad and create characters. I could never do any of that. So I knew my strengths and I leaned into them.
It's interesting, yeah, to play to those strengths, right, and to also be able to move into strategic roles, into management roles, because a lot of us, we start off technical, right? We start off doing the exact thing, but then as we progress, you want to move more into management, into strategy, into managing projects and so on. Do you think it is a good career? Do you think UX, UI, solution engineering, solution design, do you think they are good careers for people who are artistically inclined?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because, when I first joined Salesforce almost 10 years ago, the solution engineer role was very technical. There was a lot of coding knowledge required, not required, but it would be very helpful if you could do it. My job as a demo engineer at the time was to support the solution engineer role with coding aspects of building things out. But technology has changed so much. a lot of programs and software are point and click now, so that kind of coding element is less and less needed. And there's been an active kind of push across the industry, not just in Salesforce. You know, the role is now called solution consulting in some places because it's more about, yes, it's really good to have, you obviously need to have some sort of technical acumen, but it's not the same it was 10 years ago. And the same for UX and design in general as well. That's changing is a lot now. And you can see if you look at trends on Google for job searches, you know, it's going up and down. UX peaked in 2020, back down again. It'll be back up again. But as I said at the start of the call, the technology is changing at a frightening pace, and the people that will keep up with it are the people that are utilizing the new tools that are available to them and adapting to the changes in the market and
So
the
why do you
changes
think
in
it's going up and
technology.
down like that so much? Is it the companies are still trying to figure out how much they need designers, or is it external market forces or something else?
I think, in my opinion, a lot of companies don't realize how much they needed design until it was gone, and same for UX as well. So it's just an unfortunate aspect of big companies that are, you know, every company's goal is to, you know, drive revenue and growth and all this kind of stuff. And what do most people do when the numbers are down? They want to hire more salespeople. So if there's, you know, maybe space for two or three new salespeople or one or two designers, most of the time they'll go for the salespeople. So I don't have an answer. I obviously don't know. I can just share my opinions, but I think it just goes up and down in waves because it's not as valued as a sales or a technical type of person. So it can be the first thing to be disregarded.
Right. But there still is kind of a direct return on investment from design initiatives, right? There still is a very commercial angle to it that you can kind of see in the numbers. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at Gartner and all these type of consulting firms and companies, they'll do a lot of you know, studies, and they'll show there is true data-driven value in having design. Um, you've got to have a leadership team that understands design and really can see the value in it. It's not to say that some leaders don't, a lot of them do. But yeah, the biggest challenge in my career as a designer was getting my foot in and having a seat at the table and being able to show my value. And that can be tiring as well, like to say that to any people that are in UX and design here. I completely get that you're constantly trying to prove your value more so than certain other roles, and that's just, in my opinion, the nature of those type of roles in UX and design or similar fields.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You always have to be showing your worth, communicating your value. Um,
Yeah.
but anyone who's used websites where or apps that have been difficult to use, they know the pain of bad user experience or bad user interface, and we drop off it. We stop using it. I wonder if a lot of the benefits, or I wonder if a lot of the downsides of bad design are just things that didn't happen, so they're hard to measure
Yeah.
because like that user never actually completed the form. They never actually signed up fully for the app. They never actually engaged. So I wonder if like design doesn't always get the full voice at the table because
Yeah.
it the metric never happened in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like I was trying to sign up for an app the other day, Freeletics, and I think it's a great app. I think it's very nice. It's very useful, and I am going to sign up for it fully, and I look forward to using it. But the onboarding process gives you lots of decisions to make initially, and
Yeah.
it creates like a lot of uncertainty. So I'm like, I want to get this right from the start, and I don't want to put in loads of data and information that's wrong. So I'm going to do it later, and I did that like 2 or 3 times. So
Yeah.
am I on their system yet, or am I like a failed user on their system? And was that due to the sales team, the marketing team, or the design team? Or maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want to create a high bar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting observation as well. And I think a lot of people will have that experience. Same with chatbots and things like that on websites. Everyone's had a really bad experience with them. Um, but you'd have to ask the question: Are they actually analyzing that? Are they looking at the amount of people that get to 75% complete and then drop off? A lot of companies are doing that. And then you have the flip side of that experience of most people will have experienced this as well, where they are signed up to a service and then they're trying to get off the subscription service. And there's no way to do it. There's no simple way to do it on the website. You've got to ring them up, you have to type them a letter and strap it to a pigeon and send it off, and then they'll let you go. So there's that side of UX as well, which is an interesting thing to think about, because for me, as somebody involved in UX, if I have a difficult experience offboarding from a company, I will never use them again, no matter what, just out of the principle of the fact that they were trying to be purposefully sneaky with what I call evil UX. So that's an interesting kind of mirror to what example you explained there.
I wonder what the data is on that, when people leave a service because they're so frustrated and they don't like the evil UX, as you say, right? It's almost impossible to actually find the
Yeah,
unsubscribe or the cancel button or the delete account. Versus when we're too busy or too confused or too lazy to actually unsubscribe or cancel or call them up and say, look, you got to delete my account. I wonder, do you know any industry data on that, or have you ever heard any insights on that, about what's actually happening there?
I haven't, no, but I would hazard a guess that a lot of people would just they wouldn't notice €10 going out of their account every month. And I think, you'd be shocked at the amount of people, myself included, that have forgotten about certain things like that as well. So I don't know any data, but it would be interesting to see how many kind of users are still on a service, but not, sticking or not canceling if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're actually more fickle as customers and less loyal than we would have been maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Like if you think about all the people who use traditional banks, um,
Yeah,
compared to people who are using new banks like Revolut, N26, compared to Bank of Ireland,
yeah,
AIB, all those sort of things. A lot of people are going to these newer banks and they're quite fickle about moving away from the other ones, it seems. So, you have a lot
yeah.
more power in the hands of your app when you're with those newer banks. It's a lot easier. The user experience is much better. That's my experience anyway.
Yeah, you can definitely see that in the modern world, and it's just, again, it's just the way markets go. That's why competition is good to have for the end user, because it's nice to have options. We have every year in most countries we have, like, oh, change your provider, or change your broadband, change your heating, change your electricity, and it's just a constant hop across different services, um just to land grab and get as many users as possible.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But that's obviously a cost to the business as well, right?
Yeah,
If they're
exactly. Yeah.
hemorrhaging customers, right, because of bad design or unfavorable policies. You mentioned design thinking a few moments back. Can you tell us what is design thinking?
Yeah, design thinking is a five-stage process that brings us from the very start of ideation all the way through to launching a product and or service. And a few months ago, and also next month, we had a group of transition year students in Salesforce, and we ran a 4-day workshop across design thinking. So I personally love these types of exercises, because it's an opportunity for me to I learned so much from teaching younger people or new people in the industry, or want to get into the industry, these type of things. So it's a process where we go through ideation, prototyping, making an idea, testing with other users, getting feedback, building in that feedback into a final product, and then launching the final product. So within that five-stage process, you can get halfway, but if you want to Google that design thinking process, you'll get a nice image, and it has those 5 steps in a line, and it will have a circle going in a loop across all of them. And what that means is it is a never-ending process. So you can come up with an idea and you can prototype it. And why we prototype is because we want to test. You know, if I just came up with an idea and said, Roman, I have a great idea. It's for an app to make pizza, and we're gonna send it to people by, a drone. And I could just go and build the final product and then launch it. And then next of all, I realized, oh, we can't actually fly those drones in the area that we live in. So if you followed the design thinking process, you would get to the prototyping phase, you would test, and you would realize before you'd spend all the money that actually here we have a problem. Let's go in that loop and iterate and think about how we can solve this problem, and then we can launch it. So it's a very open process. I don't like calling it the design thinking process because of what we spoke about earlier. People think of design as paint by numbers, but you can use it for any idea or any process, and that's what we do with the students that come into Salesforce. We get them to build, a physical item or a physical product. It doesn't have to be an app or something fancy with loads of colors, and we get very hands-on with it. Lots of, pencils and paper and all this kind of stuff. We do no laptops, no phones, no technology. It's all hands-on to be human and talk to people and really get hands-on. So that's
Oh,
my
sounds super
my
fun.
version of it. Yeah,
Sounds
it
super
is. It
fun.
is.
They must get a lot out of that, do they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, the feedback is always great. Whether it's adults in Salesforce, I've done some sessions like that as well, or if it's newer people in the industry as well. It's a great session to do, and in a world where everything is on apps and TVs and laptops, it's really nice to be able to put that stuff away and just get some paper out, get some sticky notes, get some markers, and just have a bit of fun and get back to actually brainstorming and not go to Google or not go to ChatGPT or these tools are great, but they have their
Yeah,
place as well.
they have their place. I was going to ask you, as a creative, what is your creative process? Do you start at the computer? Do you start with the pen and paper? What is your process?
Um, I used to use pen and paper a lot, and I still do in certain meetings where I want to be present with people and want them to show that I'm really listening to them. I'll use pen and paper. But my creative process will be always what we're doing right here first, which is just talking. And it's great now that we have technology that can, annotate notes and summarize notes on calls, because then we can speak and look at each other on the camera or in person and not have our heads down the laptop. So my process always starts with speaking and talking, listening, understanding, asking really good questions, and letting the other person speak.
That's so cool. Yeah. So really doing that deep dive, that interpersonal back and forth first is really important, rather than maybe jumping a few steps and going straight into solutions. I feel like sometimes with computers, it feels like they're great for creative processes, but I think sometimes towards the end of the creative process, when you want to solidify it or crystallize it into something real, but at the start it can be a hindrance. If ever I find myself looking at a spreadsheet trying to be creative, I'm like, what am I doing? Like this isn't
Yeah,
this isn't how you be creative. You don't write down ideas in a spreadsheet. And I came across this phrase recently, which was, you know, try to be, try use your feet to be creative, meaning go for a walk or go for a run. And like when you're in that process of running or in that process of walking, you're kind of letting your subconscious come up with ideas. You're kind of,
yeah,
you're not forcing the ideas to come out like you do when you're sitting at the spreadsheet right in front of you, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's a very common phrase or joke or whatever you want to call it, that you always have the best ideas when you're in the shower, when you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
the pen or you don't have anything to take the note down. And the reason is because it's that 5 or 10 minutes in your day where you can't have a notepad or a laptop and you're forced to just be there with your thoughts and thinking. And to your point, that's why the 5 minute walk or the 10 minute walk is so good. Leave your AirPods at home, leave your headphones, whatever it is, leave your phone at home, go for a walk, look around you, and yeah, just let yourself be inspired by what you see and just clear your head and get some ideas. And that's also why it never works to just sit at a laptop for 8 hours. You need to get up and you need to keep moving, and you need to speak to other people, and yeah, just
Yeah. Do you ever find you
be
get your
open and create
ideas when
space.
you're on a do you ever find you get your ideas when you're on a hike with friends or family, or you're on a walk somewhere and you're just like you really want to take down like three or four ideas that you get just out of nowhere, and you're like, I'm not even supposed to be working right now.
Yeah, all the time, and that's where I use Siri on my phone, so I will do a voice memo or a voice note, and I find that that's really good because what's interesting about ideas and idea generation is they always come at the most random times ever, and they're gone within a second if you don't write them down. In my experience, or take a note of them, they're gone, and you can lose some really good ideas. I've lost many really good ideas, or oh yeah, I should do this or I should do that. And even last night, I had a really good idea of something work related, you know, at 8 or 9 p.m., and I just immediately went in and emailed myself. So this morning, I could log in, check my emails, and say, "That's yes, brilliant. I
I
remember that
got
now, and I
it.
can do it. Otherwise, I just forget it."
It'd be gone forever. Be gone into the ether forever.
Yeah.
Um, Now you've obviously gone from working on the technical design stuff and more into management, more and more into leadership, working with other people. Um, as you progress and you take on those new responsibilities, it's obviously different, right? Because you go from working on the technical stuff only to now trying to look after people, coach them, mentor them, leader them. Sorry, leader them, do leadership with them. Um, how do you find it is like what do you find works for encouraging younger designers who are maybe nervous, nobody wants to fail, nobody wants their idea to be rejected? What do you do to foster confidence in them, to encourage them, to tell them, yeah, look, just design it, maybe it's not perfect but we'll work on it, or maybe it's actually better than you think it is? What
Mm.
really works?
Yeah. I love talking about this topic, so I'm delighted you asked it, because there's so much that happens in our lives from the moment we're born all through our childhood up until we go through work as well. So, you might have some people that they just really can take bad feedback, and they might have been living in an environment where everything they did was criticized. I'm just using a hypothetical situation. So I really love to, again, take that same approach that I do with when I'm talking with customers or anything. Is we don't talk about design. I've mentored so many people over the past 10 years. I still do now, and everything always goes back to, let's talk about your strengths. What are you good at? What are you not good at? What is it about, what's the fear that you have about getting bad feedback? Because when people have bad reactions to things, it's always, usually in my experience, out of a fear. They're afraid to be ridiculed. They're afraid to be seen as they can't do it all, or things like that. So I really like to just sit down with people and help them build up their confidence in themselves first
What
before
do
we
they
even
think
think
will
about
happen?
design. A lot of people think that, you know, they'll be seen as, not good enough, or, we always hear about the term imposter syndrome. I'm sure in your line of work as well, Ron, and you're dealing with people like this all the time, where they have all the skills, but they don't see it in themselves. So they have to do a lot of inner work in just rolling everything back to the basics, like we did together, writing everything down on paper and just saying, "Oh, actually, I did do a lot of this stuff. I can do this." And it sounds so simple, but it's very, very effective, because I think when we go to work and we're constantly under pressure and we're constantly working on deadlines and boom, 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 you don't have that time to sit down and just think, here's what I did last week. So I encourage people to do that constant reflection on, what they've done over the last week, month, or year and write it down. Because when you start to get lost in your career or your path or in life, it's because you just don't have that vision anymore going forward. You don't know where you're going, you don't know what to aim at, and you don't know where you're going or what to aim at because you don't know who you are anymore. You don't know what you're all about or what you want to do. What's the difference that you want to make in the world, you know? You don't just want to design for no reason. You want to do things to help people. Um, but in order to be
100%.
really good to help other people, you have to be able to help yourself first. You need to sort your own body and mind out first. So that's what I love to work with people on. And I've worked with mentoring people mainly in UX and design, but across lots of other um, industries or specialties like technical and stuff like that. And every single one of the mentorships is about helping people build confidence within themselves. It's very, very rare that we ever talk about the, hey, let's look at how you do design work or how you can code, because all of these people can do those skills. That's why they were hired, but people just sometimes lose that belief in themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they're fantastic tips, by the way, and it's great that you're mentoring and coaching your team on those. Um, yeah, writing down what you've achieved this week, two or three things, super important because so often we're only focused on the problems that we have to solve or the
Yep.
mistakes that we've made. And what that starts to look like is everything is just problems or mistakes or things that need to be fixed or a to-do list. But that's not the reality. The reality is we are getting through work, we are making progress, we are
Yep.
learning. So it's a case of like writing those things down. And I really think like it opens up this part of your brain that's, you know, able to focus on things that you're achieving. So I think it's a super habit to keep going.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
the
Another
other the other
thing,
th-
just I just wanted to mention one other thing um on kind of encouraging and nurturing people in kind of newer roles. One thing that was very I had some great managers over my career. I've been so lucky, and one of the really common traits in really good leaders or managers that I had was they gave you the task and they let you come up with the plan. And if it was only 50 or 60% right in their opinion, they might just give you a little bit of a kind of guidance on getting it a little bit further along. But if it was 80% there, they would say, okay, you came up with the plan, you run this now, and I'll be here no matter what happens with it, if it's successful or unsuccessful, I'll be here to support you along the way. And that's what really good leaders do, and that's something that I was very grateful for with the leaders I've had in my career, and that's something that I have brought into when I am working with people that are more junior than me. I would always let them come up with the plan. I would always encourage them to come up with how are we going to tackle this, and I would just take a step back and just be there to answer questions. I would let them lead the calls. I would just be on the call and I would only be there to step in if I thought they needed me. And
Now, did you learn that through osmosis, Graham, by seeing other leaders do that with you, or did you do a
yeah,
course, or did you do your own reading on this?
I mainly learned it from the people I worked with, but I also have done a lot of reading as well. Various books around psychology, management, leadership, and really good leaders always take a step back. They're never up the front saying, "Look at me, I'm so great." They really good leaders know that their success is their team's success. So anybody that I ever mentored or helped, I would just get such a massive wave of satisfaction seeing them being promoted or seeing them getting a shout out. And that's when I first mentored somebody and saw helped them along that path of them getting a promotion. They do all the work, but I'm still kind of just helping them in the background. I could never forget that feeling, and I've always just been chasing that. And that just that's where my love for that flourished, and it gives me such joy to do that. So I learned it from books and leaders. And it helped me so much, Ronan, that I just want to do that with everybody else that I work with as well now. So that's kind of where it came from across those different areas.
I love it. I love it. That's going to be a breath of fresh air and very reassuring for anyone who thinks that I want to progress, I want to develop, I want to go to leader or manager, but I'm afraid that I need to be this all singing, all dancing extrovert at the top of the room, giving these motivational speeches. But being able to reassure them that there's leadership in different ways, right? You can lead by raising up other people, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And you do have to be good at speaking, and you need to be able to stand up and do those kind of events. But it's again, it's all for the good of the team. If you stand up and do those events where you're kind of explaining your team's performance or whatever, I would still bring that same ethos with me. It would always be, you know, X, Y, and Z did this, this, and this. Look at what they did. Look at what they did. I would never have my own. I would always put my name last on the list of people that were involved in the project or whatever. I just knew that, they were the superstars of it. So
I love it. So a servant leader, Graham, right?
yeah, try my best every day, but like, another thing as well for anyone that's listening that is trying to, or is afraid of failing or making mistakes, I would say just get really comfortable with making mistakes. That's where the growth is. If I look back at my own career and life, every time I made a mistake or did something wrong or could have done something better, that was where the gold mine was. If I had the perfect job and everything went perfect, I would just hit a brick wall eventually and I wouldn't learn. And even if you look at my career throughout all the different roles that I've had, it's all just adaptation and reflection and sitting down and thinking, where am I going now? Where am I going next? What am I good at? What am I not good at? What did I like from that previous job? What did I not like from that previous job? And I think a lot of people can get stuck in the same loop over and over again, and they think that they should be something for 40 years. I think those days are gone. I think the modern market requires people to be humble and to be able to sit down and say, these are the mistakes I made and this is how I'm going to do it better. That's another big aspect of being a good, successful employee, leader, whatever. It's being able to be humble and say, okay, I made a mistake there. I'm not going to blame other people or blame anyone else. I'm going to just take it on the chin and I'm going to just go straight into how I can fix it and how I can make it better.
Yeah, it's a great characteristic of somebody who wants to become more of a leader for themselves, if not even for other people, to be able to be humble, to accept mistakes, and then to still crack on anyway, and to hold your hand
Yeah,
up when things haven't gone well. And I'm totally with you. Like our economy, our world is so changeable now that the only reasonable thing to do is to be changeable and adaptable in response to that. If we're not dynamic, I think it's going to be very hard to survive going forward.
yeah,
Um, you talk a lot about values with your team, right? Or you talk a
yeah,
little bit about values with your team.
yeah. Over my career, I've always been a kind of in the company that I'm in now, it's all about the company values, and everybody's encouraged, to follow these values, and then as a result, everyone kind of builds their own set of values as well. And I think if you're somebody like me that has moved around various different roles, you need to understand what your values and principles are because that helps you understand where you can add the most value in a work aspect, or it also helps you pick the right role for you as well, because if something doesn't align with your values or principles, you're not going to have a good time in that role.
Now, how do people respond to those conversations? Do they think it's useful and very helpful, or do they feel it's airy fairy and they don't get it? Like, because in a corporate, like I talk to people about their values all the time, and generally we have like fascinating conversations and people get good insights. But I just wonder, in the corporate environment, do people find that a practical use of time, or do some people find it airy fairy and they don't get it, or do they eventually come on board?
In my experience, I haven't come across anybody that didn't see the value in it. But again, we're extremely lucky in the place that we're working now that it's a cultural thing. It's very much encouraged. It's the foundations of what the business is run on. So I'm sure it is not as well received in other companies, but we in more so in my previous roles when I was kind of a lead designer, I would have a manager above me and we would have lots of other, people working on the team. And it always helped us so much as a team to band together to know this is who we are, this is what we stand for. And why that was so powerful was we would get requests coming left, right, and center all day. And if something didn't align with who we were as a team and what our purpose was, then it was very easy for us to say, we're not the right people to help you here,
Mm.
but here's where you can go. Here's what, here is who can help you with this specific problem. So I think it's very important for people to have their own set of values. So then when certain opportunities come to them, which they will, across their whole life, if they're, lucky enough to live to whatever age, you're going to get lots of opportunities. If you know what your values are and what you stand for, then it makes it easier for you to say, this opportunity is good for me because it aligns with my values, or this one isn't because it doesn't. So I think it's very important for people to have them. And I know you've done a lot of work and workshops around that as well. And how have you
Yeah.
found people receiving it as well in your line of work?
Yeah, like I think it's the foundations of all decision making. If you don't know what you stand for, if you don't know what's important for you, how are you supposed to make executive decisions going forward? How are you supposed to commit to a clear course of action? So I found people have really benefited from it, and it's given them like a lot of thought provoking reflections and a lot of conversations with other people as well. Um, but even like seeing how it maps into their day to day life, well, I like to make it as real and as implementable as possible. So when we write out the 5 or 10 values that they have, focusing on the top five, it's like, what is the order of these? So when you go into the order of them and you're prioritizing between 1 and 5, now you're really filtering those to say this is more important. Number one is more important than number two, and number two is more important than number three. And you really have to go deep into your own psyche and your own, your own mindset to figure out what those are. And it actually takes time. It takes 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks to. You can do it in one session, but then to reflect on it properly and keep coming back to it and go, actually, maybe I need to switch those two around. Um, and then see how that plays out in real life. Otherwise, it can just be like a lovely sticker that you put on the wall, or something that you tell to your manager or your boss. But then I get people to like go into their habits based on their values, right? So if your number one value is health, let's say, well, what are the habits you have on a daily or weekly basis that allow you to live that? And then is
Yeah.
that a must or is it a should? Because if it's like, yeah, I should drink water every day, I should eat my green veggies, well, that's not really a value. That's just something that sounds nice, right? But if you say like, I must work out 3 times a week, I must drink water every day, now you're talking about um a practical step, practical habits. So uh, it's really life changing. That's why I get so excited about it, because if you get somebody who's lost or stuck or unclear, and you get them to go through that exercise, it can really be life changing for them, because
Yeah,
now they know who they are.
absolutely. Like, I think what you mentioned there about ordering the values is so important as well because they cascade down. If the first one isn't in check, well then the others are going to just be miles off by the time you get to them. And it's a good point that you make as well, Ronan, like having the values mapped out and then the associated habits to how do I live those values on a day-to-day basis, because I'm talking about myself here as well. I map the values out and then Monday is grand, Tuesday is grand, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Oh, maybe I'll just have, a bit of junk food or a bit of this or a bit of that. And then it kind of falls off if you don't have those kind of daily habits or things you need to do to continue to live those values. And going back to what I said about get comfortable with making mistakes, get very comfortable with falling off the horse constantly on your values and habits. I fell into the trap of beating myself up if I had a perfect week or a perfect month, and then I had one bad day, and then I would
Mm.
say the whole week is gone now. Just throw all that out the window and come back to it on a Monday. So that's one of the biggest things, Roland, that I've learned over the last few years is you're gonna fall off the horse, you're gonna fall off track. That's a guarantee. There's very little things in life that are guaranteed, but I can guarantee you that you will fall off track. There's no such thing as perfection. But the most important thing with that is how quick can you get back on the horse? That's the trick. That's the name of the game. It's not how many times you fall off, it's how quick can you get back on this time.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna mess up, and life's gonna happen, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
like you say, getting back on the horse is crucial, and I think not beating yourself up about it too much either. I think that can be very counterproductive to actually living out those values on a day to day basis. I think if you watch motivational videos on YouTube or wherever, you can get super pumped, and it can actually push people almost too far to crippling anxiety if they feel, okay, I have to get up at 5 every day. I have to run 10K every day. I have to eat this every day. I have to do that every day. And now they're just a slave to this set of impossible habits that they've created for themselves that are pushing them the whole other side and making things intolerable and unbearable. So it's really about getting that foundation balance, which is, well, what is a reasonable thing that you must do? Um, and what is a thing that you really should do as best you can, but not making it like. So I break it down into musts and shoulds. You don't want to have
Mm,
all must, because if you have all must, you're going to have this crippling anxiety and you're going to have a breakdown for sure.
yeah.
And if it's all shoulds, well, now you don't stand for anything very concrete. So like, let's get a nice balance of those two. That's the way I kind of think about it and talk
Yep.
about it with clients.
Yep. I totally agree. It's good to have a mix of everything around, like, because if you watch like a motivational video, as you said, motivation is great. It has its place, but it's discipline and the daily habits that really make the difference, and I'm looking at myself in the camera here, talking to myself,
Yeah.
saying that again because it's a fantasy land when you watch a motivational video and you see somebody that's hyper successful, and they're not posting a video on YouTube on a Sunday night saying I'm having a breakdown and I don't want to go to work tomorrow. Like, that's the danger of social media in one aspect, is you just see that the highlights reel of everybody's life, myself included. Like, I'm not going to put up those bad days of the dark cloud over your head or when you're having those bad days. So, you just have to be careful with, motivation has its place, like I said, but don't get caught up in believing the highlights reel as well. It's everybody makes mistakes every single day, myself included. Every human does. There's no such thing as perfection, and that's what one of the biggest mistakes I made in my career was thinking that everything had to be perfect, and if it wasn't perfect, it was the worst thing ever. So I just got comfortable with things being 80% there, like I said, like I help other people as well. It's 80% there, 90% there. Run with it, see what happens. If you make a mistake, just tweak that little bit. Don't beat yourself up. Don't blame other people. Don't blame yourself. Just fix that little 10, 20% and move on to the next thing then.
Yeah. Because all that time you spend beating yourself up, you could be spending tweaking and making your 80% even better,
Yep.
right? So just don't worry about it. Just get straight back to that tweaking process. Um, I've noticed you're writing on LinkedIn more and more. Good on you.
Yep.
Uh, can I ask you, are you creating a personal brand on LinkedIn? Are you just enjoying sharing your learnings? Could you tell us about why you're writing more on LinkedIn and how it's going?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not writing as much as I'd like to because I suffer from that fear of, oh, people are gonna think you're an idiot. Who are you to say this? Who are you to say that? Like I have those voices as well that talk me down off writing all the time. But that's why I'm writing on LinkedIn, Ronan. I'm trying to do it as an exercise in, no, you can do it. You can write stuff out there. You know, if one person gets something positive from what I'm writing, then I'm happy. Just like
Well, I saw you had
the
over
coaching.
100 engagements on a recent post. So it's more than one person. It's obviously
Yeah.
resonating with a lot of people.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to, I feel like I'm at that stage now where I have a lot of years under my belt working now. I'm not an expert in anything by any means, but I'm really enjoying just sharing my learnings. I'm a lot of the stuff I'm writing is about non-technical and non-design type of things, because I think that aspect of, the psychology and thinking and all those kind of soft skills are lacking in a lot of different people and roles. And I just love sharing my experience about it. I love speaking at events. I love doing things like this. I just get a genuine buzz off being able to share my story and help other people. And why? Is because I did the exact same thing, Rowan. I read a book when I was feeling down, or when I was uninspired. I watched a podcast, or I worked with a coach like yourself, or whatever it was, and it was so good for me. And now I just want to do that myself. I want to be that person that when people are lost, they can look at the LinkedIn post or whatever it is. It mightn't be LinkedIn forever,
Yeah,
but they could watch this video. If somebody watched this conversation and they learned one thing, or they changed their mindset, or they became more positive for a day or two, or they changed the direction of their career. I'd love that. I just love that. So it's just coming from an authentic place. But I
that's
still
awesome.
have that fear every day when I'm typing and writing. And the last point I'll make about that is I I challenge myself to just write it and just post it and go out.
Okay.
So I post it, and then I'll go and pick up my kids, or I'll go shopping or something. I'll just leave my phone at home, and I can't edit it, and it's gonna be up long enough that I can't just delete it then. So, because I would sit there and I'd tweak, and I'd say, "Oh, we need to change it," or "It's not good," or "That sounds silly, doesn't it?" Or "What if John or Mary saw that? They would think that was wrong," or something. So that's the workaround I've done, is just post it and just run away from the laptop or the phone.
That's a great habit, or that's a great hack to keep
Yeah,
yourself on
it's a
track.
bit
I think
unconventional maybe.
well, I think it's very powerful for like a junior designer, or someone starting their career, to hear how you're so experienced and you worked with so many high value clients, and you're working in one of the top companies in the world, and you're still sort of navigating these challenges on an ongoing basis. I think that's very powerful, but it's also like a call to action. It's like, yeah, I struggle with these things, and I'm still here, and I'm still going, and I probably will be there next week, and I'm still going to work through them again next week. And that it can be it can be a challenge for people in all sorts of professions, but it can be helpful as well, I think, right? If you're
Yeah,
challenging yourself and saying, can I get better, you know can I improve on what I've written last week, or can I improve on what I've designed last week? So it's just getting that balance between this isn't good enough to, I'm not going to do it at all, and just saying, no, it's good enough for now, but let's make it better next week.
yeah, exactly. And you have to think about a lot of those kind of thoughts, Ronan, come from when you're designing or creating a solution, or whatever it is. If it's like a DIY project or art or whatever it is, you have to think that you're doing it for yourself. Because if you think I'm designing this for someone else, if you just think about that, then that's where all that fear creeps in. So if you're thinking, oh, they're going to think this is bad, this doesn't align to this, or you know but that's where all that stuff we spoke about earlier is like, if you do your research, you speak to people, you understand what they need or want, or whatever it is, then you've got a good foundation to build on, and then you can say, okay, now I have the information I need. Now I'm going to do the best design or solution that I can now. You're not just plucking things out of the sky and worrying about what other people think. It's about being happy with what you're doing within yourself, not about what other people think.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. I don't think we can improve on that last phrasing of it, Graham. Um, I hope someone getting into the world of design, getting into IT, getting into a software solution design, listens to this and hears how you think about these ideas and understands how you work with people and how you ask loads of questions and how you use those interpersonal skills, because they're crucial, right, as part of the design process. Yeah, so I just want to say thanks so much for sharing all your insights, your wisdom, your learnings, and the ups and downs. Really appreciate it, and please continue to be as authentic as you're being on LinkedIn. You're already having a big impact on people. So yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, Ronan. Really appreciate it as well.
And we are off.